Jesse Wallace is now president and presiding. All you have in business come forward and you shall be heard. God bless this great state, county, and nation. Please remain standing for the prayer. Mr. Jones.
Let's pray. Dear Lord, thou art in heaven, we just thank you for each and every one that's here tonight. I pray that you give us the wisdom and knowledge to make the best decisions for this county. We thank you for your Son, Jesus Christ. We pray it in his name. Amen.
Amen.
Mr. Wallace will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Wood, please check your cell phones. I know some of the alerts may be going off so you don't disrupt the meeting.
Thank you, Sheriff. Ms. Wilson.
Mr. Coleman.
Here.
Mr. Daniel. Mr. Dellinger.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall.
Here.
Ms. Hampton. Here. Mr. Hooper.
Here.
Mr. Hughes.
Here.
Mr. Hunt.
Here.
Mr. Hurt. Mr. Mayberry.
Here.
Ms. Phillips. Here. Mr. Rochelle.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Wagner.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Commissioners, you have before you a copy of the minutes of our last meeting. I'll give you a moment to look those over, or I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to accept.
Have a motion, Mr. Wagner.
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Second, Mr. Mayberry. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, citizen petition and grievance. Anyone in the audience like to address the commission? Please come forward and identify yourself. Very good. Moving on. Receiving of committee reports, fiscal review, budget, personnel, Mr. Hughes.
On October the 6th, the budget meeting convened at 4:30 with County Executive Jesse Wallace presiding, with 5 members present. The election of committee chairman, Executive Wallace opened the floor for nominations for committee chairman, and Mr. Hughes was nominated and elected by acclamation. The next item was the election of vice chairman. Opened the floor for nominations. Mr. Mayberry was nominated and elected by acclamation. The next item was the approval of the August minutes. After review, those were voted on to be accepted. The next item was a financial report approval for July and for August, seeing there was not a meeting of the budget committee in August. For 2014, these were presented. After looking those over, discussion, those were voted on. The first item of business that we had was judicial commissioners. Judge Haley Bradley Maples appeared before the committee to discuss concerns she had with the actions of the judicial commissioners. No action was taken. The first resolution we had was to appropriate funds for the monitoring of the ground and surface water at the Humphreys County landfill by C&E Consultants Incorporated for the price of $4,650. After discussion and explanation, this was voted on to send to the full commission. The next item was a Waverly CDBG grant. This resolution accepts funds from the city of Waverly to cover the unanticipated cost in connection with the sewer project in the sum of $347,375. This was also voted on to send to the full commission. The next resolution was the 2014 property tax relief. This resolution was to agree to assist tax relief for citizens of Humphreys County that met the state criteria. After explanation, discussion, this was voted on to send to the full commission. The next resolution was to authorize the insurance of security bonds for the newly elected officers. After discussion, this was voted on to send to the full commission. The next resolution was to accept a bid from Tony Lee's Roofing and appropriate the funds for re-roofing of the Ag Extension Office. That bid was $6,947. After discussion and this was voted on to send to the full commission. The next resolution appropriates additional funds for the county's portion of the operation of the animal shelter in the sum of $4,487.50. After explanation and discussion, this was voted on to send to the full commission. Criminal Justice Grant, this resolution is to accept the offer from the state of a 75-25 grant for equipment purchased by the Sheriff's Department. After explanation, discussion, this is voted on to send to the full commission. The next resolution appropriates the funds anticipated from the state of the above mentioned grant in the sum of $7,560. After discussion, this was voted on to send to the full commission. The next item was the Governor's Highway Safety. This resolution is to accept a 100% grant for overtime and equipment of alcohol-centered measures by the Sheriff's Department. After explanation, this is voted on to send to the full commission. The next resolution is to appropriate the monies anticipated from the Governor's Highway Safety Grant in the sum of $65,435 into the appropriate line items with the Sheriff's budget. After explanation, discussion, this is voted on to send to the full commission. We adjourned at 5:20.
Commissioners, you heard the report from Mr. Hughes. Any questions for him or his committee? Moving on, Public Works and Safety, Mr. Hunt.
Yes, we met on September the 22nd with all members present. Mr. Wallace called us all together. Election of committee chairman. John Hunt was nominated to run it. Election of vice chairman, Mr. Eddie Rochelle. Next thing on the agenda was approval of the August minutes, as all approved. Memorization of bridges, Mr. E.C. Hall was here. We talked about that. Mr. Hampton made a motion that we put this off for 60 days where Mr. Roadman would be here to look at it. And so we all put that on good. Surplus property. Surplus property owned by the county and up for bids. Mr. Coleman motioned, Mr. Dillon second. Motion was approved. Fire chief. Mr. Wallace presented the committee with the resignation of county fire chief, Mr. Michael Simpson. On recommendation by Mr. Chief Simpson and other chiefs, Tim Duncan was present to take over the position. Mr. Coleman made a motion to recommend that Mr. Duncan be named chief on interim basis. Mr. Dillard seconded. The motion was approved. Buffalo Water Wastewater. Mr. Wallace informed the committee that Veteran Management Service would no longer provide services for the county wastewater at Buffalo. Hydrotechnology of New Johnsonville was recommended to take over the task. Mr. Rochelle made a motion to enter the negotiation and contract with Hydrotechnology. Ms. Hampton second. Motion approved. Adjourn 5:28.
Commissioners, you've heard the report from Mr. Hunt. Any questions for him or his committee?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Hunt, on that surplus property, is there an appraisal, do we know, is there gonna be an appraisal, or how do we know what, when we determine, come back for final approval, I have no idea.
No, sir, we had not planned to, we don't typically or historically get an appraisal on a piece of property that hasn't been acquired through tax delinquency. When the bids are in and tabulated and presented to the commission will have the option then to take it or leave it.
this tract of land is landlocked up there too. You know.
Good question. Any more questions for Mr. Hunt? Moving on. Report and communication from the county executive, commissioners, and audience in just a moment. The commission will take action to appoint a new county fire chief. Obviously, this marks, and is reported by Mr. Hunt, the end of Mr. Michael Simpson's tenure in that position. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Chief Simpson for his years of faithful service to the community in his capacity as a fireman, which I understand will continue, and also as county fire chief. I also like to take this opportunity to thank all of our volunteer fire departments, rescue squads, and first responders of every nature. They do a wonderful job, and chances are they may be doing some of it tonight. So keep them in your thoughts and in your prayers, and once again, thank you to all of them. Moving on to resolutions. Aforementioned county fire chief. This resolution appoints Mr. Tim Duncan of New Johnsonville as the new county fire chief. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Have a motion, Mr. Hughes.
Second.
Second, Ms. Hampton. Discussion.
I just want to thank Mr. Duncan for accepting this additional responsibility.
I think you'll do a great
I
job.
think we'll too.
Anything else? Mr. Hooper.
What is the term that was brought up?
Serve at the pleasure of this commission. So it's non-defined term. Any more? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations or condolences. Chief Duncan. Next item, Buffalo Wastewater Plant. This resolution authorizes me to enter into agreement with Kevin R. Coleman, doing business as Hydro Technologies, for the operation and management of our wastewater treatment plant in Buffalo, Tennessee. Have a motion, Mr. Mayberry?
Second.
Second. Mr. Rochelle? Any discussion or questions? Have a roll call, Ms. Wilson.
Mr. Coleman.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dellinger.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Ms. Hampton.
Yes.
Mr. Hooper.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Hunt.
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry.
Yes.
Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Rochelle.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, surplus property. This resolution declares surplus and authorizes the offering at sealed bid a parcel of property located in the northeast quadrant of the county and adjacent to the Hurricane Creek Watershed Dam number 8, I believe it is.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion, Mr. Coleman. Second, Mr. Hunt. Questions? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, the landfill compliance monitoring. Civil and environmental consultants of Franklin, Tennessee does our surface, or rather our groundwater monitoring and testing at our demolition landfill and closed Class 1 landfill. They have presented us with a bid to do a review of our records, to reveal our monitoring requirements as mandated by TDEC as it relates to surface water runoff and gas, subsurface gas monitoring. Costs $4,650. We took action on this back last April, but they couldn't get to it, and it was not added to this year's budget. This adds it back to the budget.
Make a motion.
Have a motion, Mr. Hunt.
Second.
Second, Mr. Wagner. Any discussion, question? Roll call, please.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dellinger,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. Hampton,
Yes.
Mr. Hooper,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Hunt,
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rochelle,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Carries. Next item, the Waverly CDBG for the Community Development Block Grant obtained and awarded to Humphreys County on behalf of the City of Waverly for work at their wastewater treatment plant. The construction bids for that project came in $347,375 higher than what was originally projected and included in the grant. Per our agreement with the City of Waverly, they're responsible for any cost over and beyond what the grant provides, and they have voted to continue with the project, have approved the expenditure of money, and have presented same to our trustee. It lies in wait for appropriation to an appropriate line item for distribution and use for that project. This motion moves the money in and out.
So moved.
Have a motion, Mr. Hughes.
Second.
Second, Ms. Hampton. Discussion?
The city has already voted on this, correct?
They have voted on it, approved it, and have tendered the funds. Anything else? FYI, we've already begun, per our previous discussion, process of applying for our next eligibility, which will be in 2015, for CDBG grant funding to be used on behalf of the city of McEwen to deal with their wastewater treatment issues. As a matter of note, we don't qualify for the type of community development block grants that we're obtaining on behalf of these municipalities, given that we only have, thank goodness, only have one utility, and the customer base is not of a low to moderate income, which makes eligibility possible. So this is not monies that we can use, but is available to us. It's put to good use for Humphreys County citizens living inside these municipalities. So could I get a roll call?
Mr. Coleman,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dellinger,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. Hampton,
Yes.
Mr. Hooper,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Hunt,
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rochelle,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Carries. Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Next item, tax relief. This resolution commits us to participation in the state's tax relief program. We do this on an annual basis. This award commits us to 30% of the total funds made eligible to Humphreys County senior citizens of a low income, and also to permanently disabled Humphreys County citizens of an equally low income. Typically, this costs the county $12,000 to $14,000. That money has been budgeted, but this action of approving participation is required, and I recommend it.
I make a motion.
Have a motion, Mr. Dillinger.
Second.
Second, Mr. Hooper. Discussion? Total tax relief possible is roughly $44 from us and $130 from the state.
Mr. Chairman, is there a criteria of each individual, what their amount would be?
It's family income, and I don't have that figure. I don't know that they've released what that figure is yet, but it's somewhere in that $25,000 range.
No, I mean, do they cover the whole amount of their amount?
Up to the allocated amount, which has a ceiling of $44 from us and $130, $174 total. So you can do the math on that. Anything else? Ms. Wilson?
Mr. Coleman,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dellinger,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. Hampton,
Yes.
Mr. Hooper.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Hunt.
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry.
Yes.
Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Rochelle.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Motion carries. Next item, surety bonds. With the election and re-election of most of the county officers, it's incumbent upon this board to approve the securing of surety bonds for each of these individuals. The money has been appropriated and is in the budget, but this approves the action.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hall,
Second.
Ms. Hampton. Question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next item, agriculture extension building roof. A few months ago, we discussed the need for replacing the roof on the building that's county-owned and utilized by the UT Agriculture Extension Service. We obtained a quote, a single quote from a local contractor. The number was high enough that I felt we could probably benefit from bidding that out. The responses ranged from right at 13,000 down to 69.47, which was the low bid, and this resolution accepts that bid, appropriates that funding, and authorizes the process. Tony Lee Construction out of McEwen.
Make a motion.
Have a motion, Mr. Hunt.
Second.
Mr. Wagner? Questions? Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Coleman.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dillinger.
No, ma'am.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Ms. Hampton.
Yes.
Mr. Hooper.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Hunt.
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry.
Yes.
Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Rochelle.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
And Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Motion carries. Next item, animal control. Commissioners, last year we agreed to a new cost share arrangement with the city of Waverly providing animal control outside the municipalities. That agreement provides that we cover 50% of the operational costs not otherwise covered by the cities of McEwen and a small donation annually from the Humane Society. The review of the previous year's expenses and the animal control budget was not available at the time we did this budget, and we budgeting insufficient funds for this. We need to appropriate an additional $4,487.50.
So moved.
Have a motion, Mr. Hall, second, Mr. Mayberry. Any discussion?
That gonna put us up to 50?
Yes, sir. No, 50% of what's left after 15,000. Oh, how many dollars? That's about 50, right at 50. Thousand.
That gets us through to July.
Anything else? Roll call, please.
Mr. Coleman.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dillinger.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall.
Yes.
Ms. Hampton.
Yes.
Mr. Hooper.
Yes.
Mr. Hughes.
Yes.
Mr. Hunt.
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry.
Yes.
Ms. Phillips.
Yes.
Mr. Rochelle.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Yes. Motion carries. Next item, criminal justice assistance grant. The sheriff has applied for and was awarded a $10,080 grant that he will use to purchase some equipment. Local shares $2,520 coming from other grant revenue. This resolution authorizes the entering into the contract to secure that grant revenue.
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Hunt,
Second.
second Mr. Smith. Any discussion? We'll, next item on the agenda will deal with the appropriation of that funding. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Next item is the $7,560 appropriation. Moves the money in anticipation of that revenue into the appropriation line item where it can be utilized.
Move to approve.
Have a motion, Mr. Hughes. Second, Mr. Coleman. Question or discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dellinger,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. Hampton. Yes. Mr. Hooper,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Hunt,
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rochelle,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner,
Yes.
Motion carries. Next item, Governor's Highway Safety Grant. The sheriff and Sergeant Phelps applied for and was awarded $65,435 in a grant that will be used to purchase equipment and pay expenses associated with alcohol countermeasures. This is a 100% funded grant. This resolution authorizes the entering into that contract.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion, Mr. Mayberry, second, Mr. Hunt. Any questions?
Do we know what kind of particular equipment, Jesse, that this is going to cover?
Yes, they'll be using data communications equipment that will not only give them access to information in the field, but also will allow them to file reports and complete paperwork while dispatched, reducing the need for commuting back and forth to take care of those necessities.
Yes, ma'am.
That's exactly right. Good question. Anything else? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Next item is the appropriation of that $65,435. Have a motion, Mr. Wagner. Second, Mr. Hooper. Roll call at your convenience, Ms. Wilson.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Dellinger,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Hall,
Yes.
Ms. Hampton. Yes. Mr. Hooper,
Yes.
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Hunt,
Yes.
Mr. Mayberry,
Yes.
Ms. Phillips,
Yes.
Mr. Rochelle,
Yes.
Mr. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Wagner.
Yes.
Motion carries. Next item, notaries, public variety.
We have one request for a new notary this month, Melissa Wallace, and 5 renewals, Regina Jackson, Vernon Wakefield, Cynthia Mars, Christy Hornberger, and Beverly Henson. All monies have been paid and bonds are in place.
That's your recommendation.
My recommendation.
You heard the recommendation from Ms. Wilson.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
Have a motion, Mr. Coleman.
Second.
Second, Mr. Hall. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next item, other business. Anyone, any commissioner like to bring anything up?
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Hughes? Mr.
Yes, sir, I
Hughes.
would.
Floor yields to Mr. Hughes.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, in your packet, I asked Miss Leanne Wagner, the Humphreys County trustee, to compile a list of people that are delinquent on their property taxes for 2013. We had 98% of our neighbors, friends, and family that paid their taxes for 2013. 2% elected not to pay those taxes. And as you can tell, it took up 27 pages of names for those taxes. These individuals appreciate the same services that we do. They require the same services. They demand the same services. If they didn't get them, they would be here in front of us raising Cain. Why they don't pay, I don't know. I also asked Mr. Bullion to compile a list of taxes that have been rendered to his office once they leave Miss Wagner's the trustee's office, they go to Mr. Bullion. And you can see on the next page, the delinquent taxes paid in 2013 and 2014. 2013, $167,833 was collected by Mr. Bullion. So far in 2014, $132,000 has already been collected for a total of $299,834.43, which is fantastic. But if you look on the next page, on delinquent taxes that haven't been paid, we still have $230,000, $202 out there of delinquent taxes that haven't been paid. After Mr. Bullion has tried his hardest to collect them, then it goes to Mr. Bob Thomason's office, and if all goes according to plan, there should be notice within the paper by the end of this month or the first of next month showing these properties up for sale. So the citizens have the opportunity to pay their taxes. If they don't in due time, then we sell the property. Sort of like the property that we ended up with there at McEwen, the surplus. But it might help somebody. We might get something out of it. So that's the end of my presentation, Mr. Wallace.
Thank you,
But
Mr. Hughes. Any comments? Anything else?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Have a motion, Mr. Rochelle, second by Mr. Wagner. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Drive safely, everyone.